This is North Pod, a North Melbourne fan podcast, hosted by Jason Hunt.
Now the backs there are. He backs it. He kicks it. Oh, the fall from Dersma. This is the speed of the culture. 3 bounces down the wing. He keeps going. 4 bounces. Joining the chorus. The Can't Lose Kangas are AFLW premiers.
Hello. Welcome back to North Pod. If you are listening to this, you must be a glutton for punishment, just like myself, because that was a really, really tough watch, the Good Friday game against the Blues. After 4 weeks of it being... I've had a difficult time watching footy the last 4 weeks. I've had weddings, family events, stuff on. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating, sitting down the couch, on the podcast service, that would be more or less appreciated. And please follow me on all social media. This would have been a good one to have interruptions for. Twitter, Instagram, it was a YouTube, real step TikTok. And I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Over the past, hope you'll join me for the next episode. 4 or 5 weeks. The spotlight, I think, is going to turn on us, rightly so. Certainly in the early weeks of the year, I think sometimes journalists and media types can go a bit early and maybe criticise teams and players and coaches. But I think it's fair enough that we're going to cop some criticism after that performance. It was really, really poor. Whilst that win against the D's was fantastic, the weeks following that, I just feel like we've got progressively more and more disappointing. And then, this, I don't even know how to describe this performance. Just really, really disappointing. So, I don't expect it to be a very uplifting episode, but I do think there's plenty to talk about and look forward towards in the coming weeks and potential changes that I would like to see. So, rest assured that's not going to be a complete bashing. It's also certainly not going to be my usual trying to find the optimism or the bright side of things, because I just don't think there was a whole lot of that in this game. A couple of things, but not a whole lot. Before we get to the review, I guess I just wanted to touch on the fact that it is the Good Friday SuperClash. So whilst the game was an absolute bin fire, a lot of good stuff happens around the game, before the game in particular, with the Good Friday appeal. As many of you listeners would know, I've recently had a son, and we have spent some time at the Royal Children's Hospital. So I think this game and the appeal in general is such a fantastic event. I think it's an absolute privilege that our team, North Melbourne, gets to be involved in this special game. I know generally every time we get belted in one of these games, there's talk around whether or not the game should be taken off us. So I fully expect that to happen. But whilst we are in control of the game and we're participating, I guess I just want to acknowledge how fantastic it is seeing particularly all the sick kids that the players and the club get around during the week on match day as well, and get them involved in stuff. There was a bit of an activation, I suppose, at halftime with Ben Brown and Anthony Franchina having a bit of a goal kicking contest to raise some money with some kids out there as well. It's just that side of it is fantastic. So I think before we get into the nitty gritty of this nonsense, I just want to acknowledge that and obviously encourage people to donate if you haven't already, because it's obviously a really important thing for Melbourne and for Victoria, but just society in general. I think it's a fantastic thing. So now that we've sort of got the positive framing out of the way, let's jump into the Roo review. So perhaps a little surprisingly, there weren't too many changes from the loss to the Suns. In fact, just the one. With George Wardlaw fit, he came back in, and that saw Riley Hardiman, who was the sub, step out. The sub in this game was Dersma, so I guess they're the only changes. I know that there were some people, wanting more changes. Personally, I wasn't that upset with the changes beyond, or I guess for the reason being, I think that there is a point where as the coach, Clarko has to back in and support the players to a point, right? For me, my breaking point was this game, to be clear. So I will be calling for some changes this week, but I do understand, our previous 3 games, there've been parts of them that we've played well, and then we've just fallen away significantly during other parts of the game. So I understand backing in the players and giving them a chance, I guess, to, improve. I think it's pretty rough dropping Riley Hardiman, but I understand it's hard to find a spot in that rebounding halfback position with Fisher, Finn O'Sullivan, and also Caleb Daniel kind of filling the role that I think Hardiman would, potentially Darcy Tucker as well. So really tough on Hardiman. I'd like to get him in, and I think we'll be able to this week, but I understand there was a bit of a selection squeeze there. Harry Sheezel's 50th game, I guess worth noting, he played okay for his 50th game. Certainly we as a club didn't do him very proud. He's had really remarkable first 50 games of AFL football, Harry Sheezel, just been phenomenal. So that I think is worth acknowledging. And then, we get to the game and the score and just ugly stuff. North Melbourne 11-5-71, defeated by Carlton 24-9, 153. It's a monster score. And certainly the second half is when it got really piled on, but to concede 24 goals it's real. That's dire. That's as low as it gets for our whole team defence and the ease with which we allowed the opposition to score. I think, the fact that we actually scored 71 points, which is not a good amount, but it's, it's okay. If you're losing sort of 70 odd to 90 odd, I think you'd go, okay, we didn't get the chocolates, but we played okay. But yeah, conceding 153 points, I think the commentators were remarking it. That's Carlton's equal highest score at the venue, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I'm not sure that people probably are going to want a blow-by-blow of that game. I certainly didn't want to relive it in too much detail, but I'm going to whip through a few things here. I actually thought at the start of the game, we made a strong start in that first quarter. Probably the first half of that first quarter, we were competitive. We went 2 goals for 2 goals. I thought Charlie Comben took a nice intercept mark earlier that got him involved in the game. I think it's important for a player like him to get early touches. So, I was feeling positive for him when he took that early mark. Paul Curtis kicked a goal from 50 metres out on the boundary, which was, that's a real morale booster, I think, when a player is able to take an opportunity like that. It was a beautiful kick. We saw Tristan Sherry attacking a ball in the middle of the ground, created a bit of I guess it wasn't quite an intercept. He didn't complete it, but he spoiled and created a turnover opportunity for us in the middle part of the ground. I thought that showed our want to attack. I thought we were attempting to pressure and tackle early on. I do think there was a desire to do that. It wasn't through a lack of trying at all. And George Wardlaw, probably the biggest highlight of that first quarter, came on maybe a third of the way through the quarter, something like that. And I thought, had immediate impact, really attacked the footy, found plenty of it. Was a real bright spark and got us going through the middle part of the ground when we were finding it tough to win contested ball and win clearances. And then, just a lapse, if you want to call it that, but it wasn't brief. It was a prolonged period of sort of 8 or so minutes where we conceded the last 5 goals of that first quarter. So super disappointing way to end the quarter. We went into quarter time, as a result of that, down by about 5 goals. And straight away, you're feeling pretty down the dumps because you've played a good 10 to 15 minutes to start the game, and then, we dropped the ball, so to speak, like that. Again, I thought our second quarter was our best quarter of the day. We recovered a little bit. We played some solid footy. We kicked 4 goals to 2, put ourselves only 20 points down at half-time. And, on the precipice of getting back into the game, I wouldn't have said that we were, feeling positive into half-time, but at least we'd stopped their momentum. We'd managed to kick a few goals ourselves. And I thought we were sort of evening the ledger with the contested footy. Certainly not tipping it back in our scales, or the scales in our favour, but I thought we competed. Wardlaw was continuing to work hard. We kicked our best goal of the game with a really nice launch from half-back that ended in Zerha goaling from about 50 metres out. Logue, Sherry, Daniel, Tucker all got involved with a really nice chain, sort of, half-back along, I guess, the centre square, and then, like I said, ending up with Cam Zerha for a long goal. That was fantastic. That's the kind of ball movement we want to see. I think for me, the issue, or what I noticed watching that second quarter and all of the first half really, was that the danger signs were definitely there. Chera and in particular Hewitt just killing us at stoppage. I think you'll kind of cop Patrick Cripps beating you at stoppage, but really he didn't have much of an impact. Looked more dangerous when the ball was in the front half, actually, to be honest. But yeah, Hewitt in particular just killed us, and Chera was really nice alongside him in the middle. And you could see, in the second half, the Blues just absolutely capitalised on that dominance from the middle, and that's really where the game was lost early on and continued to be lost. Like I said, I don't really want to relive it blow by blow. The third quarter was 6-1, and the last quarter was 9-4. So 15 goals to 5 in that second half, and we certainly had a consolation goal or two late. So there was a real patch in the middle there where it was just an absolute dominance by the Blues. I think our goal in the third quarter was the George Wardlaw one, which came with about a minute left in the quarter. So the third quarter, they kicked 6 consecutive goals and just put us to the absolute sword. You can talk about some of the umpiring decisions, which absolutely some were a bit questionable. You can talk about how the Blues were super accurate. That's not always going to be the case. They kicked really accurately and took all of their opportunities, hence their 24-9, and they kicked a few points late for what it's worth. So they were 24 or 23 goals, 5 or something like that. So, you can talk about the fact that kind of blows the scoreboard out a little bit. I get that, but we were just bullied by a team that was smarter, harder, and cleaner for the vast majority of the game. And I guess the damning part about that is that they're a team that was out of form prior to the game and under pressure. They'd beaten West Coast for their first win last week, but by no means were they convincing. They're expected to be a top 8 side coming into the year, and they haven't performed to that level. And they came in and just trounced us. So yeah, a lot to unpack from the way that it fell apart in that second half, which we'll get to in the story of the game in a minute. I guess capping off the game review, Zach Fisher did a hamstring, by the looks of it, not ideal, late in the second quarter. It was pretty innocuous. It wasn't one of those ones where he was at full speed. It looked like he went to accelerate and it just pinged it, essentially walked straight off. So I guess that gave Dersma a full half of footy, which is nice, but certainly injuries are not what we need. I think for me, it's Zach Fisher's injury that probably opens the door for Riley Hardiman to come in next week, or I hope that's the case, because I think Hardiman can be a distributor just like Zach Fisher's job is also to distribute. So that, I guess, is the summary of how the game went. Certainly a lot quicker than previous weeks, but I guess we're about to relive some of those really important moments, and I just don't think it's worth going over them twice. Story of the game time, and yeah, I guess I alluded to it, but there was get this, there were two halves to the game, but by that I mean there were two really different ways that I thought we lost it. In the first half, and I guess in particular that first quarter, it was stoppage and contested footy. Hewitt had 12 clearances for the game, 34 touches, kicked a goal, 9 tackles, 2 goal assists. He killed us in contested situations and at stoppages. He did what we're used to seeing Patrick Cripps do. I thought early on Sherry was smashed in the ruck by De Koning. I think by the end Sherry was on top of the ruck battle in isolation, but the damage was being done by the Carlton midfielders, so it wasn't as though Sherry's tap work was giving us an advantage. He wasn't able to find his mids as often or as frequently as we'd like, and yeah, just I guess that was capped off in the first quarter when Sherry was just bullied out of the way by De Koning, who grabbed it out of the ruck in forward 50 and gold. He was pumped up about that, I think. Sherry's had De Koning's measure in recent matchups, so I think he was pretty pumped to kick a goal on him, and that really put the Blues firmly in control in that first quarter. It was a big moment. And yeah, like I said, Hewitt just took full advantage. It was, to be honest, a pretty embarrassing setup around stoppage, considering this is supposed to be an area of strength for us. Wardlaw was the only one consistently desperate for in that first half. He put his body in the line, he attacked the footy. I thought he was really strong in the contest, and I thought Parker was for the most part strong in the contest, but there are a lot of our other mids that I just thought wanted the ball delivered to them on a platter, and when that wasn't the case, they weren't prepared to defend and to tackle and to chase in that first half. So killed at stoppage and in contested situations in that first half. Like I said, should be a strength, but it was not. And I think I spoke about it last week in when I previewed this game. We are both supposed to be strong contested teams. You know, we've got the likes of LDU, Simpkin, Wardlaw, like I mentioned, Luke Parker, who are really good inside mids. They obviously have Cripps, Walsh, Hewitt, Chera that can all play that way. I thought it was going to be a battle of, you know, who can win out that contested footy battle, but it was the Blues in that first half far and away, and they continued doing that in the second half. But the other thing that crept into the game in that second half was the patented turnovers and errors that we have seen time and time again. We simply cannot get through games without mistake after mistake, and like it or love it, or hate it, I'm gonna go through some of them here because they're just killer. And what hurts the most is we've seen so much of this before, and we just don't seem to learn from these mistakes and turnovers, or we don't seem able to, I guess, make adjustments to limit their impact. So, I mean, Paul Curtis, I must have said on this podcast 8 or 9 times, he's just, for me, he's too undisciplined. He gave away a 50-metre penalty. He was trying to slow the game down with a free kick inside our attacking 50 for Carlton. He's doing that kind of clumsy wrestling to try and get up and to try and slow his opposition player. The umpire warned him several times, then paid a 50. You could make an argument that it was 50-50, but in that moment, I think he'd already done his job. He delayed the game enough that he should have just gotten up. I'm just so tired of him giving away undisciplined 50-metre penalties. He actually didn't play a bad game, but that moment was super disappointing. Another one that I think I must have mentioned this so many times, and I can't get my head around how the coaches must be saying the same thing. Charlie Comben just keeps kicking high and long and slow balls across defensive 50 and just allowing the ball to hang in the air for far too long. The example here was a switching ball to Darcy Tucker. It never looked on. You know, he really had to kick it to Tucker's advantage for it to work, and it wasn't. It really hung around the air. Blake Acres come across and took the intercept mark. Then, unfortunately, Tucker instinctively knocked out the ball out of his hands, and it was another 50-metre penalty. So that was embarrassing, really. I don't think it's a hanging offence for Tucker. I sort of understand. You know, he knocked the ball out of Acres' hands before the umpire had called for a mark. So it's one of those ones where it's unlucky, but the free kick is, or the 50-metre penalty is there. But it's Chom's kick that's created that. And I just, for the life of me, cannot figure out how he keeps making these mistakes, because it happens every week. And for me, surely the coaches are either coaching him in that area and showing him how to effectively switch the footy with lower kicks, with faster kicks, or with kicks at least, you know, to the advantage of a teammate. Or personally, what I'd be doing is telling him that's not his go. You know, if he wants to kick long to a contest, great. If he wants to go 25, 30 metres short pass to a free player, great. If he wants to give the hand pass to Caleb Daniel or Harry Sheezel or Finn O'Sullivan or Zach Fisher, like someone else on the way past, great. But I don't think these long, decisive kicks or short, precise kicks are for him. So that's super frustrating. I have to imagine that the coaches are talking about that. Jai Simpkin, another one that his kicking just simply, it's not up to AFL standard or AFL midfielder standard. He bit off an inboard kick from the wing that missed by 10 metres and was a shocking way to turn over. He did absolutely work his butt off to try and make up for it, but the damage was done at that point. It was, you know, giving last week where he had his kick smothered in the middle of the ground and it went up the other end for a goal. It's just one of those back-breaking turnovers where, you know, our whole team's out of position. We're all trying to create something offensively, and that mistake puts everyone in really tough situations. I mean, like I mentioned, this is not, it's not personal. It's just there's so many examples like this. Luke Parker, who, you know, I thought had a solid game, practically gave a goal assist to Zach Williams for one of his 4 goals. It was a really nice hand pass straight to Zach Williams, who was facing goal and could snap truly pretty easily. it was a handball under pressure. He was being corralled and half tackled, Luke Parker, but a player with his experience has to do better than that when you're deep inside 50. You can't afford to just give up possession like that. You'd much rather be pinged for holding the ball there than give the ball straight to an opposition player who's running towards goal like Zach Williams was. Comben and Corr spoiled each other for what should have been an intercept mark deep inside 50 that allowed Zach Williams to kick another. I get that there's, at that point in the game, you're kind of desperate to at least make the contest, but you've got to communicate and you've got to understand who has right of way in that situation, because it's embarrassing. Colby McKercher is desperately out of form. He fumbled the ball several times during this game, and one of his fumbles invited pressure. He gave a really tight, hot hand pass to Charlie Comben, who fumbled his disposal, and that resulted in another goal. Caleb Daniel, even, who, I think generally speaking as a player is a pretty reliable kick, but is being made to look like a fool in this North Melbourne outfit at the moment. He missed a switch kick by about 20 metres. Looked up the field, there was nothing for him to kick to, so fair enough, he tries to go sideways, but absolutely missed it. And again, it's these kind of turnovers that just create impossible situations for the defenders and us to defend. So, I could have listed more, but there's, however many that was, 6 or 7 examples of us just not respecting possession, not respecting the footy, and giving it up far too easily through, for the most part, needless mistakes. I sort of can understand the pressured ones like the Parker and the McKercher ones that I discussed. There's at least some reason behind turning it over there, but when we are just gifting it to the opposition through sheer stupidity or really bad skill errors, that's where it really grinds my gears, and I think that's where supporters in general get really, really frustrated, and totally understandably so. We've lived through 4 or 5 years of mistakes like that. I think, to cap it all off, late in the game, our mistakes were getting so egregious that we had to find another way to lose possession and to turn the footy over, and so we made our second 666 infraction for the game, which resulted in a free kick in the centre square for Carlton. Didn't even have to worry about losing the clearance on that one, I guess you could say, because there was none. Just so simple. We cannot even stand in the right spots before the ball is bounced. I'm one that I can't believe that the 666 rule has a warning in place. I think you just pay a free kick first time. I'm not sure why for that particular rule there has to be a warning. The fact that we had the warning and then, infringed again, just astonishing to me. Absolutely astonishing, because it's really quite simple. You get your 4 players in the centre square, you get your 6 players inside each 50-metre arc, you get your 1 player in the goal square, and you have your 2 players in the wing. It's not actually that hard. But the fact that we were giving away a free kick for that, I'm sure it was in relation to some interchanging that was happening or to some swapping positions. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but the fact that it happened twice says to me that we just are not clean enough in our communication, and we don't know as a group what we should be doing and where we should be. So this was as poor a second half performance as you'll see. It goes with a pretty terrible first quarter as well. Just overall a super disappointing and disheartening game, because I think, like I mentioned, the Melbourne game, I think we saw a lot of positive signs. We saw a glimpse of what it can look like when it all goes our way and we're downhill skiing in a good way. We're all running forward and expecting that next pass and running for each other. But since then, I feel like we've taken some incremental steps back, and this was a large step backwards, unfortunately. And I hope that I'm sure you are getting a sense of my frustrations. It's just a bit dejecting watching a game like that. You kind of, when you're sitting on the couch watching it like I was, there's a real element of what am I doing? I could be spending my time a lot better than this. I could be happier than I am. So that I think sums up the story of the game. It's just, we're finding new ways again to lose games of football comfortably, and it's not a happy team to be supporting at the moment at all. Let's time for Shinboner of the Week and the North Podium voting. And I spoke about him earlier on. George Wardlaw is the Shinboner of the Week. I thought really, really impressive in his first AFL game for the year. He's played a little bit of VFL footy and came in, was certainly on a minutes restriction or was playing with limited minutes, played 54% of game time, so just a touch over half the game. More or less, if he was on the ground, he was playing inside mid. And like I mentioned, made an impact. He was the only player, I would say, that tried his guts out all game. 21 disposals, kicked a goal, 5 clearances, 3 inside 50s. And particularly his first half, I think, showed what we've been missing when he's been out of the side. Attacked the footy, attacked the opposition with vigour, didn't give up. His disposal was a bit poor, and that's always going to be the knock on him. I think he's never going to be a good kick. I do hope that he can become a better kick than he is. He's a good hand passer, and I think his decision-making by foot's generally pretty good, but it's his ability to execute, which is a question mark. In a game like this where there's so many other poor things happening around him, and he's giving it his all, I'm not going to ding him too hard for that. I think, to be honest, it even is a little bit more endearing because he is just doing everything that he can with what he's got. It's a Shinboner performance from George Wardlaw. I think he was the bright spark in that first half when, we were a bit temperamental. Kicked a goal in the third quarter, like I mentioned, a bit of a cherry on top for him. And hopefully he can just build in the next couple of weeks and start to get up to more like 70% game time. I think that's probably where he needs to sit in the 70s. More or less, he's going to be playing 100% midfield time when he's on the ground. So we know he's had his hamstring issues. We know he's had concussion issues. We do have to look after him, so I understand getting him in for only 54% of the game time. I understand that, and he was fantastic, bar his kicking, and I think that's probably what we will come to expect with him over the next year or two, because his kicking's not going to improve overnight. It's going to be a long play, and like I said, he's never going to be an elite kick, but he does have to figure out how to, I guess, use his kick the best way that he can. That's something that we'll touch on actually later on in the podcast, but definitely Shinboner of the Week, George Wardlaw. And as we get into the actual voting, as you'd expect, not a lot of players in the votes. George Wardlaw is the only one that I've given a 2. No one got a 4, no one got a 3. I think that's pretty obvious in a performance this bad. So George Wardlaw, 2 votes for his absolute gut-running effort and his attack on the footy. I thought he was good. He had a good game. And then we do have some 1 votes. So Paul Curtis, 3 goals, 12 disposals, 5 marks, 1 of them contested, a goal assist, 4 inside 50s. He scored from the opportunities that he had for the most part. He did apply pressure and present pretty consistently. Unfortunately, the blemish with the 50-metre penalty, which was a dumb decision by him, that's the blemish in his game. That's probably more why he's more like a 1 as opposed to a 2. But you can't knock a 3-goal performance too harshly in a general team performance this bad. So I'm happy to give Paul Curtis 1 vote from this game. I think of the midfielders, Luke Parker and Harry Sheezel were our best. They both can also receive a vote. Parker, 23 touches, 2 goals, 6 clearances, 5 inside 50s. I thought was probably our most consistent two-way midfielder, similar to Curtis. Did have 1 major blemish with that turnover deep inside opposition 50, but otherwise I thought tried his guts out, and the fact that he was able to kick those 2 goals really helps. You want those mids that can go forward and score, and we know that Luke Parker is someone that can do that. I thought he was probably unlucky not to get a vote last week, so I'm making sure I'm getting him a vote this week because he was solid. I thought played his role without it being a fantastic game. Harry Sheezel, 32 disposals, 6 tackles, 6 clearances, a goal assist, 3 inside 50s. Probably the knock on his game for this one was 23 handballs out of his 32 disposals. So his impact probably not what we've seen him be able to do over the past couple of years in his 50th game. But I thought probably our best outside midfielder, Parker, spent most of his time trying his best to do that grunt work, although we know that Carlton really bullied us in that area. I thought Sheezel on the outside of the contest was solid. at least he was able to accumulate. He was more or less assured in disposal, didn't butcher it and turn it over consistently, but certainly not one of his best performances. I thought he competed and played his role without doing too much more than that, so worth a vote. And then in terms of the defenders, pretty hard to evaluate their game, in isolation, just based on the fact that the team defence was so poor, the ball was coming in so often. So I've given Luke McDonald a vote. I thought his 13 disposals, 4 marks, 2 tackles, 3 spoils, 1 smother. I thought his game was really strong, particularly because he was such a fast and good decision maker in this game. Under pressure, he was able to make the right calls, and he got us out of hot water several times, which is not something that we would have said about him over the past couple of seasons. So, yeah, I think he could probably hold his head high in defence. Continues his strong form from this season. Certainly, again, similar to the Sheezel and the Parker, it's not a game that he's going to look back on and think, gee, I had a blinder. But I think for the most part, he played his role, Luke McDonald. And like I said, made some really clean decisions. And then the final vote getter, Aidan Corr, 18 disposals, 6 spoils, 7 marks. I thought that the strength in his game was his communication. He really tried his absolute best to communicate with the back six and to support his other defenders. Logue was the primary defender on Charlie Curnow, who was always going to be a tough matchup for any of our defenders, which freed Corr up to sort of be switching regularly. They didn't have another established goal-kicking tall forward, Carlton, down there with Harry Mackay not playing. So Corr was able to be a bit more of not an interceptor, but he was certainly switching off and playing more of a Jake Lever role where he's coming off his opponent to try and help out. We saw him switch on to Charlie Curnow several times, unsuccessfully for what it's worth, but I think he did everything that he could in those moments to help out Logue. Aidan Corr was furious with Caleb Daniel at one point for not filling the hole that Curnow led into, and I think for me that speaks to the fact that he knows what should have been happening. He knows what we're trying to do, and similar to McDonald, I just don't think that we could attribute much blame to Aidan Corr for what went on in terms of those 153 points being scored. So that's the votes for this game. Not too many in the votes. You'd expect that from a really poor performance. But to recap, George Wardlaw, 2 votes. I thought he had a good game. And then players that I guess more or less played their role or were good but had some blemishes. Paul Curtis, Luke Parker, Harry Sheezel, Luke McDonald, and Aidan Corr. In terms of what the North Podium standings look like now, it's actually Harry Sheezel out to a lead, which is a little surprising given I don't think his season has been exemplary, but he has been pretty consistent. So he's out on top on 8 votes. Jai Simpkin, 1 behind him on 7. And then we've got a 5-way tie for third. Tom Powell, Nick Larkey, Luke Davies-Uniacke, Luke McDonald, and Paul Curtis on 6 votes. So that is what the podium looks like right now, but it's certainly not something that I am going to be spending too much time focusing on after a performance that bad. I mentioned it off the top, but I just cannot thank you enough if you are listening to this. I hope that it's therapy for you like it is for me, and it's helping you to unpack and I guess understand what's went on in that game. Please continue to support me by listening to the podcast whenever you can. I really appreciate it, and sharing with any North Melbourne fans that you know. If you haven't already, subscribe on your chosen podcast service, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen. And you can get involved with my social media at NorthPod Show. I'm on all the standard social medias at the moment. If you would like to support the show in an additional way, there is a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. No obligation, but I do appreciate all the support. And thank you so much for listening. I absolutely would understand those people that can't put themselves through it this week. It's a tough one, so thank you so much for listening. All right, Kanga clipboard time, and this is where I'm probably going to get a little bit harsher than I normally would. I think it is time to make some selection statements come Thursday of this coming week. there aren't many players that I think should consider themselves absolutely safe. And I think what's frustrating me, and I alluded to it earlier, is most of the players, or the players that are making these mistakes, are just making them over and over and over. So at some point, they need to change or they're going to be dropped. I think that's the reality. I think Clarko, we saw him with Bailey Scott. He's not afraid to drop an established player, and I think we're going to see some more established players dropped over the coming weeks. Just to speak to, I guess, what I'm talking about there, Jai Simpkin, his kicking is not AFL midfielder standard. He is the captain, and I think he's a tough one to assess because he absolutely tried his guts out when he turned it over. He had a really nice rundown push/tackle on Sam Walsh out of the middle. That was, a gut-running effort. I think when he did turn it over, he did his best to tackle and corral. So that is all he can do in that moment. But he has to find a way to not have his kick be the liability that it is right now. Whether that means he's just not biting off those difficult kicks, even if it is that's the general game plan, he's just not capable of it. And I think for me, there's too many players that, like him, kind of have to play within themselves to adjust to negate those errors. If all he's capable of doing is kicking a really safe kick to a target or kicking long to a contest, that's all he should be doing. But I guess the problem there is that's really limiting what he's able to do for us offensively, and therefore what we're able to do offensively. So I don't think he's going to be dropped next week for what it's worth. I'm not calling for it, but I am calling for him to figure out how to play within his limits, because it's just not working at the moment. He is creating some horrible turnovers too often. I know he's trying, but there comes a point where trying isn't up to standard. It's not good enough. You actually have to, that trying has to amount to more than it's currently amounting to. Paul Curtis, I've talked about, like, how many free kicks and 50-metre penalties will he give away before it changes. He is in really good goal-scoring form this year. So again, I'm not anticipating he's going to be dropped. But at a certain point, I think there needs to be a conversation had with him about, if this continues, it's the balancing act of how many mistakes are you making and how much is it costing us versus what you're bringing offensively. I think right now he's doing enough offensively to keep himself in the game. He'd be one of the better small forwards in the comp this year. He and Larkey not doing too much wrong up front. But there comes a point where you've got to get this ill discipline out of your game, and he just doesn't seem to learn. I don't expect to completely stamp it out. I think that's unrealistic. But this was another one of those ones where it's, for me, he had time to think his way through it and not give away a 50-metre penalty, because this was not a snap decision. This was 15 seconds nearly of him essentially rolling around wrestling his player and being told by the umpire, I'm going to pay 50 if you don't let him up. So he needs to change. Dylan Stephens was one that last week I thought actually had a solid game, but he dropped a chest mark uncontested. For me, that's almost immediate AFL dropping kind of stuff, because you can't drop a chest mark. It put himself under pressure. He then had to, I think, hand pass it back to Aiden Corr, who was 15 metres behind him, who then has to kick long and high in order to actually get the meterage on the ball that we needed. That's a big error. I don't think holistically he had an awful game, but it's errors like that really hurt. Tom Powell, simply nowhere near enough defensive running and corralling. He's one that I think selection pressure should be on. I thought he had a really good start to the year with 2 great games. His 4 since then have disappointed me, and I'm not seeing enough defensive mindedness from him at all. Charlie Comben, stop kicking it high and long and cross goal. You're a smart dude. I just don't get it. Surely we're coaching him against that at this point. I certainly would be if I was his coach, but I'm behind the microphone. I'm not in the coach's box. Colby McKercher, similar to Tommy Powell, I think, is another that I think is genuinely under pressure for his spot at the moment. He seemed to be playing a bit more higher up the ground for the first half. Certainly in the second half of the game, he was further behind the ball and just didn't put his body over the ball too many times, let hit the opposition side bully him and push him off the ball, or it just fumbled it under inferred pressure several times. So for me, it might be worth him getting his confidence back at VFL level. He was just being found out with physical pressure and not having enough impact offensively to make up for it, which I guess is where like I talked about with Paul Curtis, I think for the most part, what he's doing offensively is making up for his errors. At the moment, I don't think I could say that for Colby McKercher. He's got, a flash of brilliance or two per game, but the mistakes or the fumbles, the things that he's not able to do are really hurting us. So for me, I think his position's, potentially at risk. And Cam Zerha, I'm not sure how many times you can kick it to the goal square before you realise that that's only the best spot, to kick it if we're at the back and we're slingshotting. If there's a pack forming in the goal square, that is not the spot to kick it to. You've either got to make the distance or you've got to put it sort of 20 to 25 metres out as opposed to 10 metres out in the goal square. I don't understand players that do that. You've got to be smarter than that. And he made one of those kicks, must be the third or the fourth quarter. I think it was the last quarter. Just a really long high kick that was always going to be spoiled over the line by Wiedering. We've got to be smarter than that. So, again, I'm not expecting Zerha to be dropped, but you never know. With team balance stuff, there's a chance that someone like him could be asked to play a different role, I suppose. So, all of this is to say I'm expecting some changes at selection this week. Bailey Scott was the first established player dropped. I think McKercher is close. I think Tom Powell is probably not far behind. We really need to get some two-way runners, in the good times and the bad. So we need those players that you can rely on to be consistent two-way runners. Fisher's going to come out with his injury, so I think surely that gives someone like Riley Hardiman the opportunity to come in for Zachy Fisher. So there's a forced change, but honestly, I'm expecting to see at least 3 changes this week, because if you go down by that many points, I think there's got to be some consequences at selection. Yeah, I think for me, they're the first names that come to mind. McKercher being number 1, and probably Tommy Powell not far behind. I guess link in with that. Our midfield is supposed to be a strength, and it's just not as it currently stands. If Big X is not getting it down LDU's throat, we're being thoroughly beaten. We need a shake up in there. It's been sort of teetering for the last couple of weeks, but this was an absolute demolishing that we copped. Wilfield was not bringing a whole lot offensively when he was in the side, but I think his work defensively is a marked improvement on what we're getting at the moment. So I would like to see him at least considered. He's a really good tackler. He's a good contested footy player. And like I've said before, I do think he's actually a good kick in terms of our midfield mix if we can find ways to get the ball in his hands. So he's one that I think would potentially balance out our midfield. I'm not expecting it, but I'm a little bit hopeful that we might see that for someone like Tom Powell. Having both Wilfield and Wardlaw maybe makes us a little flat-footed potentially, but yeah, I just think the balance is not right at the moment, so I'd like to see some change. I think I'd like to see less Jai Simpkin in the midfield at the moment, with Wardlaw back in there and maybe Powell either at half-back or dropped. I think that's how we get someone like Wilfield some more minutes through there. And Simpkin's just not a good enough kick at the moment for me to see him playing full-time midfield minutes. I'd like his time a little bit spread more towards the forward half of the ground, because every time he gets the footy, I'm nervous about the way that he's going to dispose of it by foot. Sheezel, I think, also needs to get himself into gear and play a bit more defensively as well. It's time for him to step up in that area. I think potentially he's gotten away with how well rounded he is as an offensive player. He's a great accumulator. I think he needs to work defensively as well and take that step. We cannot be waltzed through at stoppage and contested situations like we were. So that midfield is on notice. It's supposed to be a strength. We have spent a lot of draft capital in that area trying to develop it. We're seeing, some of the fruits in terms of individuals, but as a group, that midfield is not working and not functioning at the moment. So I think it warrants a change. And I guess in terms of other areas of the ground, I think it is time to throw some magnets around. I think, is it time to swing Chom forward? Is it time to have Finn O'Sullivan move more up to the wing? Is it time to maybe bring Toby Pink back into the defence if we're swinging Chom forward and maybe allowing Logue to play more of an intercepting role like Chom normally has been doing? These are just ideas. I'm not advocating for all of them, but usually I'd say let's stay the course. Let's give players time to develop, but I think for most of them, we've given them some time. I think it's that bad that we need to see some experimentation. It's definitely warranted. You want to see that the coaches are trying some things. So I don't necessarily want everything changed, but I would like to see something. And, if Whitlock wasn't injured, I'd say let's bring him in, and therefore we would be able to swing Chom forward. He's done a bit of an injury, so that's not necessarily an option for us right now. That's maybe where I'm suggesting Toby Pink. I know earlier on I was a little bit, what are we doing with Toby Pink in the side, but yeah, maybe the solution to Chom's problems is that we just swing him forward. We play Larky, Chom, and Darling as a three-pronged tall forward setup, and we see how that looks for a few weeks. I do think there's potential for it to work so long as Zurhaar knows that he's playing a much smaller role. When I say smaller role, I mean literally he's playing a crumbing role alongside obviously Curtis and Constanti and whatever mids are moving through there as well. Yeah, I don't know. I just need to see some change because it's just not working at the moment at all. And I think this game was so bad that you need to see some tangible adjustments. The last thing on the clipboard here, we've demonstrated that we can lose games in 3 different ways now. So, yay us. We're familiar with losing it through turnover. We've done that all of last year. Last week it was our inability to defend ground balls inside 50, and this week it was contested footy and clearance. So for me, that's just significant. That's massive alarm bells. That sound the alarm. Our armour has that many chinks in it that opposition teams can just pick and choose which little chink they'd like to attack us through at the moment. Understandably, fans, myself included, we're at our wits' end. So I think it's super important we see a response next week. We can't possibly plug all those holes at once, but we've got to figure out ways to slowly chip away at blocking up certain things. So I cannot have us losing next week contested footy. That's kind of a non-negotiable for me next week. If we're going to turn it over through trying things, okay. If we are finding it difficult to defend fast footies inside forward defensive 50, okay. But with all the talent that we have through the middle of the ground, we simply can't be getting smashed in the contested footy next week. We've got to tackle, and we've got to find options in congestion. So that, I think, is going to do us for the clipboard. A lot of negativity there, certainly more than normal, but I just think there's so many things to discuss there in terms of what we can or could do. And I really hope the coaches are going to try some things out next week. Last segment here around Arden Street, and not a lot of news this week, just the VFL win to talk about. 84-82, a win over the Carlton VFL side, and definitely some players that are pushing for selection. Will Phil, who I alluded to, had 23 disposals, 4 clearances, 6 marks, 10 tackles. I thought from what I saw of his game, did enough for me to warrant potentially being, put into the side. Bryn Teakle kicked a goal and had some time in the ruck, 23 hitouts, 6 marks. Not someone that I'm anticipating is going to find his way into the side unless, Jack Darling's really out of form. Bailey Scott, 21 disposals, not enough to win his way back in, I wouldn't have thought. Cooper Harvey kicked 3 goals. He continues to find the scoreboard. Geordie Payne kicked 2 goals and had 13 touches. And the defenders in general, I thought, performed pretty strongly. Riley Hardiman, Toby Pink, the Dawsons. I'm expecting to see a couple of these players next week. Hardiman and Will Phillips probably at the front of that queue. The VFL continue to play some pretty good football. So hopefully that means we've got enough of those players playing well that we start to see some of them. But yeah, in terms of how many, you don't want to have 7 or 8 coming in and out. I'm certainly not expecting that. But like I mentioned before, 3 or 4 changes I think would be warranted based on the performance that we saw this week. The only other bit of news, I guess, Nick Larkey did an interview with Channel 7, Unfiltered, I think it's called, which is definitely worth a watch. I've seen some snippets and I do plan to watch it in its entirety. I think really potentially that's some more uplifting or positively framed content that you could have a look at, because by golly, do we need that right now. Looking ahead to next week, it's a Saturday game, Saturday the 26th of April. We're back in Adelaide playing Port Adelaide at 4:15 p.m. And based on the way they dispatched the Hawks last week, it's a worry. It's certainly not a game that I'm looking to with a whole lot of confidence, but the Port have got Sydney. I think they're playing them Sunday, so possibly by the time you're listening to this, that match has happened, but I'm recording this Friday night, so not too sure about that yet. For me, this is, playing Adelaide gives me hives. It's not a place that we've had a lot of success recently. Port Adelaide's pretty hard to read. They weren't in great form before they belted the Hawks. But it's absolutely a chance for a response. I think that's what we need to see. We need to see a contested footy response, and we need to see us compete for 4 quarters. That to me is the bar for next week. Normally, I'm just more around let's compete, let's be in the game. But when you perform this poorly, I think anything other than really putting Port Adelaide, to the sword, a contested footy and competing hard is not going to be up to it. I guess the last thing that I'd like to say, I know I'm frustrated, and as fans, we're frustrated because we care. It's something that no doubt a lot of us are feeling really frustrated, dejected. Can't believe that we're still losing games of football this way. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that at times such as these, the players are hurting too. They're the ones that have to live with that performance and the fact that they actually went out there on that field. So whilst I'm sure it's tempting to really be super frustrated with them and almost take it out on them, we have to remember that all we can ask for them is to continue to improve. All we can ask is the coaches give them the best possible chance to do so, and all we need to see is effort. If we can see evidence of that effort and evidence of the players doing their absolute best to execute a game plan, I think that gives us that gives us some solace. But we didn't see enough of that in this game. It was a really shocking way to lose an amazing, the spectacle is an amazing spectacle. It's such an amazing game. Like I mentioned, the SuperClash. We can't afford to lose like that this year. Again, I think otherwise there'll be some serious trouble at the club. So again, as fans, we can be frustrated. I'm frustrated, but I think we have to remember that the players are feeling the same way as us. They're feeling the same things. And we're all on the same team. We're in this together, even if it feels as though it's falling apart around us. That's going to do it. If you've made it this far, power to you. You're a gem. Thank you for listening. Hope that this has helped you. It's helped me. Yeah, we'll power ahead to next weekend against Port Adelaide, and I hope, God willing, that we put up a better performance next week. I will speak to you then, as always, as hard as it is at the moment. Go North. Thanks for listening to another episode of North Pod. If you give me a rating or review on your podcast service, that would be much appreciated. And please follow me on all social media at North Pod Show. I'm on X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I'm also very active on the North Melbourne subreddit. Hope you'll join me for the next episode.